Taoiseach, I think we are all glad to see some signs of de-escalation over the Ukraine, with Russia withdrawing some troops from the Ukrainian border. But I just wonder, our government and Minister Coe be very, very quick to be critical of a possible attack by the Russians, which of course would be totally unacceptable on Ukraine, or the massing of troops on the Ukrainian border, which are totally unacceptable. But not a single word of criticism of the United States and NATO for its role in cranking up and escalating this situation, particularly by its eastward expansion of NATO, something that was promised after the Cold War that would not happen. And indeed, never criticised the United States for its other support for sort of authoritarian or brutal regimes. So yes, if you want to criticise Putin for sidling up to Ukraine, good. Will you criticise the United States for arming Saudi Arabia to the teeth to bomb the hell out of Yemen? No criticism. You criticise the Russians doing military exercises in our exclusive economic zone. Will you say it is now unacceptable for the Americans or the British to do the same thing in our exclusive economic zone? Or indeed, would you go even further and say United States military is not welcome in Shannon Airport en route to conduct military operations elsewhere in the world?
The first issue in terms of Deputy Boyd Barrett raised in the Russian-Ukraine crisis, and Deputy Boyd Barrett, indeed Deputy Parry, said that they would be critical of a possible attack by the Russians on the Ukraine. I welcome that. But the point is that I don't see the role of NATO and Russia as comparable there, actually. 130,000 troops massed on the borders is a fairly intimidating prospect for any country. In my view, it's not justified. I think there are security issues that Russia justifiably can seek assurances on. I think dialogue is the best way to do that. And there are well-worn international mechanisms for such dialogue, and particularly in respect of the overall security architecture in Europe. But the massing of such a large force is very, very worrying in terms of just basic security, basic peace, and the possibility of a state like Ukraine, a country like Ukraine, to carry out its business for its citizens with self-determination, freedom, and not having that enormous pressure over them. So I would welcome any moves to de-escalate, and in my view, it should never have got to this stage. Perhaps we should talk to countries in the Baltics, countries like Poland and other countries who do feel they need a presence, given their history, who do not feel secure, and that is just the honest position. If you talk to people in many of the Eastern Bloc countries that became democratic, came within the European Union, they're very fearful and they feel vulnerable. We only saw that recently in terms of Belarus, where an authoritarian regime, Lukashenko, just orchestrated migrants to come from the Middle East, forced them over the borders in Lithuania, Poland, in a brutal manner, brutal exploitation of migrants to undermine neighbours that were calling him out in respect of the hijacking of a European plane through Belarus airspace. This type of authoritarian behaviour is unacceptable and needs to be called out. Needs to be called out and not equivocated on either. And so there are issues in Eastern Europe that we may have the luxury to tell them how they should live and how they should protect themselves, but they're entitled as democratic states to organise their protection. They have fears and genuine vulnerabilities because of past experiences. And I think we should acknowledge that. That said, I think sensible people should sit around the table, and I pay tribute to what President Macron has been doing, President Schulz or Chancellor Schulz these days in engagement and in talking through the issues and facilitating, hopefully, on the Russian side, with those kind of talks, a de-escalation. And the American government, the US government, has engaged in a serious way in respect of the Russian security dimension, and have put proposals on the table. And I think that's now been acknowledged. But we wait, and we earnestly hope that the conflict will be avoided for the sake of the citizens of the Ukraine, who do not deserve such to be living under such a threat.